some of us, SharePoint is a collaboration site. For others of us, SharePoint is simply a place to store documents. For some of us, SharePoint is a workflow engine that's used to automate tasks that we do on an everyday basis. But SharePoint is more than any of those individual things. See, SharePoint's not an individual application like Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. It's not even a suite of applications like Outlook 2010 with a calendar, tasks, and email, or Microsoft Office. Microsoft SharePoint is more than simply an application or program. SharePoint is what's called a platform. And you and I can use SharePoint to do the thing it does best, which is to create powerful websites that have features that allow you and I to work together in ways that we hadn't previously imagined. SharePoint is a product that's installed on a server. So unlike Word, for example, or Outlook or Adobe Reader, we don't install SharePoint on our local desktops. Now, there are applications that we use with SharePoint that we do install locally. For example, you and I might want to use SharePoint Designer to create workflows or to change how SharePoint appears. Or we might want to use InfoPath to create forms that work with SharePoint. But SharePoint itself lives on a server, and you and I then connect to that server using a browser from our desktop or laptop, from a tablet, from a mobile device. But for many of us, our first introduction to SharePoint and the primary way that we use SharePoint isn't using a browser. It's by using the Office products that we use already. For example, we can create and save products in Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, or Excel on our SharePoint site. We can edit the documents that we create either on our desktop, in a browser using Office 365, or we can view them on a mobile device. Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, these core Office products, are made to work with Microsoft SharePoint. And so it's very easy to collaborate on documents by placing them in a SharePoint environment. The other thing we get then, of course, is because that document is hosted on a server, I don't necessarily need to have access to my own laptop or desktop to be able to go retrieve a document. It's very easy to access my documents from this common store where I save them using Microsoft SharePoint. But I can also use other applications to work with SharePoint. For example, when I'm working in Microsoft Outlook, I can have a calendar in SharePoint that I connect back to Outlook. Perhaps my team's calendar or a calendar of events that we're responsible for. Or we might create a common calendar in SharePoint that allows me to see when different people in the office are out of the office or are on vacation or attending conferences. So we can create group or team calendars in SharePoint that every single member of the team can view using Outlook. The same thing is true for contacts and for tasks. InfoPath has a special relationship to SharePoint because InfoPath is used to create form templates that other users can then fill out using InfoPath Form Filler and SharePoint. So I'll create a form, host it in SharePoint, and make it broadly available to an entire team. I can publish Visio diagrams as web pages and host them in SharePoint. And there are enterprise services available in SharePoint Server, which provide hosting for things like Visio, Access, Excel, and so on. Microsoft Project actually uses a particular version of SharePoint for people who want to collaborate using Project at the enterprise level. So we have these core Office applications that are well supported by every version of SharePoint. And then we have these other members of the Office family that have some integration with all versions of SharePoint, but that have special services in SharePoint Enterprise, the version that we'll be talking about in this course. But what is SharePoint? I've told you a little bit about what it does, but what is it? Microsoft has been asked this question ever since the very first version of SharePoint came out, which was called Team Sites. So Microsoft